Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Tuesday, April 9th. It is 4:03 p.m. Eastern Time. Dow Jones finished up 59 points to another all-time high, 14,672, up 0.4%. S&P 500 fell a little shy of its high, up 5 points, 0.3% to 1568. Yes, that is where it settled, and the Nasdaq finished up 15 points to 3237. Gold 1585, oil $94, and the 10-year Treasury at 1.75%. Tokyo's Nikkei unchanged. Shanghai up 0.6%. Consumer prices in China for the month of March were up 2.1% over a year earlier, which is good, down from a 3.2% pace in February. Food price inflation, which is the key, fell back to a pace of up 2.7% in March. It had been about 6% in February. London was up 0.6%. Factory output in Britain was up 0.8% in February over January, but these are highly volatile figures there. That was, though, better than expected. Paris unchanged. Frankfurt down 0.5%. February exports in Germany down 1.5% from January, worse than expected. German exports to the euro area were down 4.1% from a year ago. Back to China, Fitch downgraded China's long-term currency rating from AA- to A+, citing a number of underlying structural weaknesses in the Chinese economy, including low average incomes, lagging standards of governance, I can attest to that, and a rapid expansion of credit. It's the first time a major international ratings agency lowered China's sovereign credit rating since 1999. Back in U.S. markets, shares of Herbalife, the nutritional products company, fell $1.45 to about $37 as KPMG announced today it had resigned as the auditor after one of its senior partners engaged in insider trading in the stock. Herbalife said in a statement that KPMG's resignation had nothing to do with its accounting practices or the integrity of its management, which of course has been called into question by hedge fund king, or you'd like to think he's a king, Bill Ackman. And Carl Icahn has been taking the other side of the trade. Ackman has a short position in Herbalife. And Ackman suffered a blow yesterday when, after the close, J.C. Penney announced that Chief Executive Ron Johnson had been ousted. Johnson, of course, was the former Apple executive who had a disastrous 17-month stint at the top of Penney. News of Johnson's ouster yesterday afternoon as I was doing my video. The shares initially shot up from about 1580 to 1740 in the aftermarket. All you need to know is they closed today at about $13.90. So bing, bang. Oh, it was quite a ride the last 24 hours. And the reason why it went down was because Johnson was replaced by Mike Ullman, who was the previous CEO before Johnson came on board. And Ullman's performance had never been thought to be that good, otherwise he wouldn't have been replaced. Ullman had been blasted by Bill Ackman, who happens to be Penny's largest shareholder. So again, an interesting ride for Bill Ackman. I have not seen a comment from Ackman yet. Ullman is going to be slashing capital spending to save cash. The whole creditor issue being a big one now for Penny. Ullman is likely to quickly restore store coupons and splashy sales events. Turning to Portugal. Its international creditors said that they would delay the next payment in the country's $78 billion bailout until the government finds $1.3 billion in new spending cuts. A task that some economists say may be too big. German Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble said on German radio that Portugal had no alternative but to look for savings elsewhere. The European Commission called for a speedy decision. A spokesman for European Commissioner for Economics and Monetary Affairs, Olli Rehn, said once the government has suggested the measures it intends to take, the Troika will need to assess them. He stressed that Portugal's fiscal targets won't be adjusted in view of the Supreme Court's ruling in Portugal. Officials monitoring the bailout from the Commission won't be able to complete their review until the government has explained how it plans to plug the hole. Again, at 1.3 billion euro, Portugal was put in the tight spot when the High Court ruled that some of the austerity measures in this year's budget, including planned cuts in the public sector, were illegal. The court said they unfairly discriminated against public workers. Fitch Ratings said the ruling would also significantly narrow the government's options for the years ahead if any spending cuts that affect civil servants are deemed unconstitutional. The agency said if that interpretation is correct, the ruling represents a setback to future fiscal adjustment efforts in Portugal. This is a greater concern than its immediate impact. Economists have been saying that to make a significant dent in government expenses would mean Portugal would have to cut wages and pension spending, which certainly are politically difficult, and Barclays said those two, wages and pension spending, account for close to 60% of primary government spending. Prime Minister Coelho of Portugal said in what was described as a grave 15-minute television address last night, "We cannot raise taxes further. The only option is to cut spending. We need to avoid a second bailout. The government will not hesitate and is committed to the bailout." Coelho said that the cuts would come to health and welfare spending. Speaking from China, Christine Lagarde, the IMF chief, insisted that the euro would survive, but refused to rule out further upheaval. "I don't have a crystal ball. My dearest hope is that there is not yet another country down the line that needs to be repaired, and that could require support from both the European partners and the IMF." Not good. Turning to North Korea, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, speaking to reporters in Rome today, said if any small incident is caused by miscalculation or misjudgment, it may create an uncontrollable situation. So North Korea today said the Korean Peninsula was headed for thermonuclear war and advised foreigners in South Korea to consider evacuation in the latest in a series of apocalyptic threats. The warning followed a similar evacuation advisory the North gave last Friday to foreign embassies in the capital Pyongyang, saying it could not ensure the safety of their personnel if a conflict broke out. In a statement by the official North Korean Central News Agency, it said the situation on the Korean Peninsula is inching close to the thermonuclear war, and it did not want foreigners in South Korea to fall victim. North Korea also said today the U.S. and warmongers in Seoul are in the process of amassing weapons of mass destruction in the South and waiting for the opportunity to strike. Now, earlier today, North Korean workers followed Pyongyang's orders to boycott the Kaesong Joint Industrial Zone, which is right across the border, the South Korean border, signaling the possible demise of the sole surviving symbol of cross-border reconciliation. The manager of one of the 123 South Korean companies operating in Kaesong said not a single North Korean worker showed up this morning. That's out of 53,000 North Koreans that are employed there. This is, as I said the other day, financial suicide for North Korea. Kaesong provides $90 million in annual wages. Established in 2004, Kaesong has never been closed before. This is a place that I've seen from the DMZ. Yu Chang-gyun, vice president of the association representing the South's companies in Kaesong, said operations would have to be normalized swiftly to prevent permanent collateral damage. All firms have reached their limit. If things go on like this, all of us will face bankruptcy. The North has indicated that South Korean media reports that it would never dare close Kaesong had affronted Pyongyang's dignity. It also took particular exception to comments by the South's defense minister last week that Seoul had a military contingency plan to ensure the safety of its citizens in Kaesong. More than 300 South Koreans have left the area and returned to the South, but as of today there were 475 remaining, and of course the concern would be that they could be held hostage. Jerry Seib, Wall Street Journal, has some interesting comments. North Korea's 30-something leader, Kim Jong-un, may well be inexperienced, delusional, and even a bit crazy. He also isn't entirely irrational if he's feeling hemmed in and isolated. From North Korea's perspective, the neighborhood in which the new leader operates has gotten distinctly tougher in just the past few months. How much those bad vibrations have helped incite North Korea's provocative behavior in recent days is impossible to know, of course, but it's logical to assume that these adverse political trends are feeding Pyongyang's current bout of paranoia. Bit by bit, Mr. Kim is choking off the thin strands that have created a semblance of cooperation between the two Koreas. Some of North Korea's bluster certainly may be part of an effort by Mr. Kim to prove his manhood to the older military leaders in his own government, but it's also entirely possible that Mr. Kim feels he's already growing more isolated internationally and that he needs to do something to jolt his neighbors into concluding he won't allow himself to be marginalized. That was Jerry Seib. That's all for today. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Wednesday. Always remember to keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And for more stuff, go to stocksandnews.com. Take care.